Welcome to CISO Insiders podcast. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing leading CISOs in the industry for a light conversation about anything from their favorite drinks to favorite vendor to key influencers' biggest accomplishments and failures, myths they like to debunk, advice they want to give out, and even some tips they can extend to the eager vendor who's knocking on their door. Join us for a light talk. I encourage you to walk away with at least one insight that will help you better yourself or your business. Thank you all for joining us today for another episode in our vCISO series. Today we'll be talking to Eric. If you could remind me of your last name again?
Etherington. I know it's a tough one.
Yeah, well, it's a tough one for me, not being a native speaker, you know. So Eric actually runs the vCISO program in the Cadence Group. Eric has started his career over at PwC, holding a manager role in the security and compliance space before joining Dolby, where he served as a CISO for 11 years. A few months ago, Eric decided to take on yet another challenge, and he now leads the vCISO department at the Cadence Group, a well-established and well-respected cybersecurity company in the US. So having served on both sides of the fence, both as a CISO and a virtual CISO, I'm hopeful we would be able to learn a lot about the similarities and differences between the two roles. Now, given the fact that we don't really know each other, I would be very happy if you could, introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi. So it's great to be with you, Ben. Great to be with the audience. Great to talk about vCISO. It's definitely a new area that I think a lot of people are interested in, but a lot of education we need to do on our side to kind of let people know what that's all about. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
So I'm, Eric Etherington. I recently left Dolby Labs after a long stint there to do the vCISO work. Prior to my time, or actually while I was at Dolby, I was still a remote employee. I've lived in Oregon for a number of years now. So, when COVID came along, I felt kind of well prepared as I could be for it, being that I'd already been working remotely for a while. So I kind of felt like I was just an extension of what I was already doing. I think the harder side for me and everyone else is on the family. I do have school-age children, 2 here at home with me and my wife. So it's been an adventure doing the homeschooling with them, and now happily having them back in school. So it's been quite a year unlike anything else. Between COVID and homeschooling and starting a new business venture, it's exciting times.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting for the school district to open up here in California. I'm not hopeful it will happen this year, but I guess you can never know, right?
You can hope.
Yeah, you can only hope. So great. So usually, typically, I like to ask 2 icebreaker questions here about your marital status, but you already mentioned that you're married +2.
Boy and a girl, both in elementary school. The youngest just starting kindergarten, so quite a year for her to start. We wanted her to be able to start school under normal conditions, and we were a little hesitant kind of going in, but she loves it. The boy loves it. I mean, it's been great to see the difference of seeing them getting to see their friends every day, and it's so much less pressure on us and my wife having the kids home all the time. So it's been a nice change. I look forward to you having the same experience.
I can only imagine and can only hope for that to happen. Okay, so I see our kids are also close in age. My son, my oldest is a 4th grader, and my youngest is a 2nd grader. So. So they didn't really spend too many months in in-person school here, but yeah, hopefully maybe next year. Okay, and if you don't mind sharing, what's your favorite drink?
Oh, I think for years and years I was a beer guy. I got really into beer, but as I've gotten older, beer is much tougher on the waistline. So I've transitioned to wine. I find I can enjoy a nice glass of wine and not have to worry about getting on the scale too often.
Yeah, I remember, growing up, my father always told me that the reason the French are so thin is because they drink red wine after every meal. I'm not sure if that's true or not. So anyway, I would really, I'd be more than happy to chat with you now and ask you a bunch of questions about life, about what it is being a CISO, what it means being a vCISO, some challenges. So if you don't mind, let's dive right in. Uh,
Sure.
what's the one thing you wish you'd known when you began your career?
Oh, I think the biggest thing is just trust yourself and your decision making. I remember having a leader tell me early on, if you can make 8 out of 10 decisions, if you can make 10 decisions, you're going to have a bigger impact on a company than if you only make 5. So if you're trying to make everything perfect all the time and you're only making 5 decisions, you're better off making 10, having a couple mistakes, because you're also, me specifically, he said, you're the kind of person that is going to learn from your mistakes. You're going to be harder on yourself for the 2 that you didn't get perfect, and you'll get them right next time, but you'll have a much bigger impact on the company the more decisions you can make. So, I guess for me, it's just try not to be so perfect and make more decisions and have a bigger impact. Trust yourself.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think, I think I read that about a few very successful individuals. I think Jeff Bezos is one of them, and Warren Buffett is probably another one that I read about, that they try to tend to, they treat their time as, the most valuable resource. And I think it was Jeff Bezos who said that he tries not to make like more than 1 or 2 big decisions a day. I think
Mm-hmm.
that was the guideline there. And I know from another something I read about Warren Buffett that he is very precious with his time. I mean, he keeps his time, like he's trying to free his time as much as he can and just save the time for the really important stuff. So I think you're off to a great start here.
Yep.
Um, what would you say was your biggest failure, and what did you take out from it?
This was a tough one. I feel like over time I haven't had like a colossal failure that jumps out, but there's definitely a couple of themes that I see kind of threading through where I've had issues, especially working in the security domain. I feel like whenever there's been an issue or lessons learned looking back, it's always been as a result of like not involving enough people early in the process and being transparent about the why of what you're trying to do. um, you can work with a small group of people or think you've got a decision nailed, but if you're not building the consensus and sharing that with as many groups as need to be involved, there can be unforeseen impacts of that. And and it also helps, there's going to be unforeseen things that happen anyway when you put in security changes. So if you have people on your side as to why you're doing it, kind of on a bigger level, those small issues that come up, you've already got people on your side. They're going to stand with you. So, I think it's just trying to put in that legwork with all the people involved so that when bumps come up, you've got people on your side.
So in other words, like, be very clear about your mission statement really early on, and then keep an open line of communication with people, and just making sure maybe on like on an ongoing basis, just making sure that everybody's on the same page, right?
Exactly. So, I mean, I think the way I like to go about it is, start to bring up problems while they're early on, while they're small, so that, I think people need to hear things more than once, right? So if you're working with a CEO, CTO, CIO, and you feel like, hey, this is going to be a problem, I'm going to start educating them on this so that when you ask for a different approach, everyone's already familiar with it and you've already been talking about it. And it's just like you're continuing the conversation. It doesn't feel like you're coming into the sky is falling. You're not surprising people. People are already bought in and have been listening to you and are involved. So when you finally say, hey, this is what I think we should do, it just makes it much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it has a lot of similarities to the marketing world, where, you need to really hone your message and know what it is and be able to deliver it. So I think it goes back to like very similar, I would say, root cause. for that. Okay. Now, looking back on your career, would you have done anything differently? Like, like looking back, did you think you would take a different path, a different route?
No, I felt like I was on the CISO route for a while. I think the one thing I would change is once I got to that point, I think I was probably two heads down trying to solve problems in my job, in my company. And I wish I would have used more of my lessons learned to share more with the security community. I think that's very common now. But, I think in a lot of ways, that's what's led me to kind of changing my career trajectory is wanting to share more and work with more people instead of trying to just solve problems at one company and be so focused on that. I think, the security community has gotten really good at sharing, and there's more avenues for that than ever. And I wish I would have been doing more of that over the last 10 years.
Yeah. And, I think as an attestation to that, I think this very podcast where I'm interviewing CISOs is like, it's one piece of evidence, because I was amazed by, the number of CISOs who were willing to participate and share. And again, I'm not, as you'll see, I'm not like asking specific questions about their security programs, about, anything that might breach confidentiality, just to share like, daily stuff like daily routines or, like biggest failures and accomplishments and what's important and versus what's not. I think this platform for sharing is really helpful, and and as you just said, I think the industry is much more mature nowadays to be able to accept that. So yeah, it's definitely a good time to be in cyber, I think.
Agreed.
What would you say were the best resources that have helped you along the way?
It's definitely a handful of CISOs and CISOs that are probably more friends than peers, people that are really going through the same thing that I'm going through and know me at the same time. Because I feel like when you're trying to solve CISO problems, security problems, there's the technical aspect of it. But in a lot of cases, it's more about how do I get this accomplished in my organization? And it's the organizational problems that you need help from mentors or other people that have gone through it to help you navigate that. And having people that are friends or people that know you, know how you like to operate, having them be able to give you feedback, not just on, oh, here's a technical solution to that problem you brought up, but here's how you can be successful in your organization because I know you and I know your organization based on what you've told me. So I think having, peers and mentors that have done it before have been the best resources for me.
So this is a common answer, and that actually brings me to the next question. Can you name like 3 specific individuals that were the most influential to you?
I spend a lot of time reading books on just how to improve, either, from a management perspective, definitely technical as well, but really just kind of like, how to be like a more effective human being. And I feel like the one book that I come back to, the one resource that I just find myself coming back to over and over is Tim Ferriss's Tools for Titans. Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not, but okay. I'm going to look it up.
It's an interesting book because essentially what he did is he came up with a list of 5 to 10 questions that he thought were the most interesting questions you could ask an influential person. And he sent them to industry leaders, thought leaders, and just said, hey, what's your take on these questions? And then all these people responded. So in a way, it's kind of like an encyclopedia of knowledge. It's over 600 pages, but I find myself going back to it because what you end up doing is you read feedback and best practices and how these super influential people got to where they were, but then they tell you, oh, I went and read this book. This made a big difference for me. This podcast is my favorite podcast. And next thing you know, I find myself picking that book up. I read 20 pages and then I find 3 books that I haven't read yet. And I go off and do that. And then I come back to Tools of Titans when I feel like I'm all caught up or I don't have anything on my reading list. So I think that's just like a great central place of knowledge. And I know Tim Ferriss himself has been a big influence on a lot of people in the tech space.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. Actually, The most influential book for me was Built to Last. And actually, when building up my company, I really adopted a lot of like the core ideas from that book and the core concepts. So I could totally like relate to that. And you know, the reason I got to know that book was I was doing research. I was looking for like influential books to market leaders, and I ended up picking up the book that Jeff Bezos I think pointed to, and that was this book. It was Built to Last. So I could definitely, you know, relate to having that effect by reading a specific book. What's the one common myth about your profession or field that you think you'd like to debunk?
Oh, that's an easy one. I think there's a misperception out there that people that go into being vCISOs are people that just weren't successful as CISOs or couldn't make it. So it's kind of that idea of, oh, those who can't make it go off to be consultants or do something else because they couldn't make it within a corporate structure. And I don't think that's true at all. I think in a lot of cases, people go to do vCISO or consulting because they want to share their knowledge with lots of companies and not just work with one. So, you know, I think that's something, you know, when I see people say, oh, why did you do vCISO? You couldn't get a CISO job? It's like, no, I could have got a CISO job. I'm doing this for very different reasons.
Yeah. And you know, I think it has a lot of similarities of like the reason why people choose to be consultants, not because they can't do other job, but because, you know, it provides much more, I mean, it's more diverse. It's interesting. Yes. You get to meet a lot of companies, you get to meet a lot of people, you get to expand your network in a very substantial way. So I can totally relate to that. So tell me a bit about your market and maybe a bit about Cadence Group. Do you have like a specific market segment that you operate in?
Sure. So, you know, the Cadence Group historically is really focused on security compliance. So they're experts at SOC 2, ISO, HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, PCI, you know, your really core set of security compliance and helping companies get ready for that. But in terms of market segments, you know, they tend to work a lot with early stage companies, you know, companies that are SaaS platforms born in the cloud, you know, and that's part of why I partnered with them is those companies tend to have a need to figure out, they don't necessarily have a CISO in place, but they need to figure out what their security strategy is. In a lot of cases, compliance is a big part of that, and that becomes a goal to help enable them to sell their product to other companies. But there needs to be a strategy beyond compliance. So that's really where we focus, would be early stage technology companies that don't have a security leader yet, where someone like myself can come in and kind of give them a roadmap, give them a plan for the next 6 to 24 months. And if I end up handing them over to the compliance guys on the other side of Cadence, that's great. In other cases, you know, it might be helping them build out a program and a team that then takes over and they don't need me anymore.
And just a quick follow-up question here, and feel free, you know, we can edit this one out if you feel like, but isn't there like an impartiality issue if you provide your services as a vCISO and then, you know, another group from your company comes in and do like a SOC 2 audit?
Yeah, so it really depends on, you know, what they want to do. There's definitely an independence line there. So in some cases, we will do vCISO services, really set up their program and do readiness for audit. But in that case, someone else would be the auditor. But if they want the Cadence Group to be the auditor, yeah, there would definitely be limits on the amount of things that I could do as acting on as management in their case.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And we have a similar setup with two sister companies of ours. GRC Consulting is like the consulting side, and, you know, provide some auditing services such as PCI. But like if we want to do an ISO 27001 audit, we have this other company called Consilium Labs, and obviously we have like clear boundaries and impartiality set in place. We can't share customers, we can't, you know, can't do anything like that. So that's why I asked it Like
Yep, we
that
have a
question.
very similar arrangement.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What are and again, you alluded to the fact that you work mostly with startup companies or early stage companies. I'm assuming these are mostly startup companies. What would you say are like the common challenges that you see among your customers, like the challenges that your customers are faced with?
Well, I think first off, it's understanding the security expectations of their customers for what they're selling. I think these companies tend to be really good at being engineering focused, building a platform, building a product, but then when they go to sell it, what questions are they going to come back? What are those expectations of the people that they're going to be selling their product to? I think that's where those companies, when they're especially still under technical leadership, they can be surprising. They might not be ready for that. They might not have started to talk about compliance, so they're not necessarily thinking about what their security roadmap looks like for the next year. So it's really helping them come up with that plan to say, okay, if you're going to start selling, it's one thing if you are selling to direct to consumer, but if you're going to be doing a big data type platform and selling B2B, then there is going to be security expectations that you're going to have to meet, and starting to think about those sooner than later, it'll just put you in a better position to be able to sell your product.
Yeah, and I pretty much tell the same to my customers. So, if you're in the B2C space, so maybe with the exception of PCI, so I mean, if you collect credit card information, you'll need to comply with PCI and probably get your certification in place. But if you're in the B2B space, so that's when you really need to plan ahead and have a compliance program in place. And it's really different. Like, let's say you're in the B2B space, but you're a fintech company. So that would look different as opposed to if you're in the B2B space, but you're in the health space, because you have different laws and regulations. And if you operate in Europe, you're liable to to be under GDPR and other others like possibly other privacy laws in different countries. So yeah, but would you say that, like, as a rule of thumb, would you say that most of your customers that need to put a compliance program in place are mostly in the B2B space?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure.
Same for us. Okay, and as an external vendor yourself, and you mentioned you might be running the vCISO program for for some of your customers. So that intrinsically that means that you work with other vendors as well. Some of them might be competitors, right? Some of them might be friendly competitors, and others might not be as friendly. So how would you define your relationship with other vendors? Do you have like any good advice to how to play well with others?
Well, I think, when you look at this whole pool of vendors, whether it's you or other vendors, in the end, you're just trying to do the right thing for your customer. And in some cases, that means buying a service from me might be the best thing they can do, in my opinion. In other cases, I might say, Ben's company is more suited to doing this. I'm going to refer you to Ben. So, because in the end, my job is to be a trusted advisor for them. And, I'm not going to achieve that if I'm just doing what's best for me. It really comes down to doing what's best for them. So in some cases, that'll be, Cadence can do A, B, and C for you, and you're going to be great. But D, E, and F, I'm going to point you in another direction because you're better off using someone else. So that's how you build up that trusted relationship. And in the end, that I think that reduces the friction between vendors, because if everyone's trying to do the right thing for the customer, then we all have the same goal.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with what you said. Just recently I had a customer coming in wanting to do a combined ISO 27001 and a high trust assessment, and I just pointed him in the right direction for like a single vendor that can do both. But definitely, I mean, I think some people regard everyone as a competitor, where I'm with a state of mind that the market is big enough, and we don't all need to excel, and we don't all need to provide all the services all the time. We can definitely share. The market is huge, so
yeah, and I think it just comes down to, your expertise. If you want to make sure that you're an expert at what you're doing, and if you get watered down by getting pulled in too many directions, it's just going to water down your expertise, which again isn't going to lead to the best outcome for the customer. So it's about giving them the best expertise for their problems.
Yeah, agreed, totally agreed. And you don't, I think maybe we're in early stages of your company, you might want to take too much. You might, what's the expression here? You might want to bite off more than you can chew.
Exactly.
But I think when you're mature enough, you flat out refuse some projects. I know I have, and I still do, because you don't want to be in a place where you're not, where something that you're asked to serve, like a service that you're asked for, is not in your wheelhouse, because that would reflect poorly on your company at the end.
Yeah, and it's important, especially in the vCISO space. I'm not an expert in everything, but I have a network of experts for everything. So, that's part of sitting in the chair, is knowing when to farm something out to a different source and when to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm. So what's your biggest challenge when you start working with a new customer? Like, is it onboarding? Is it, the ability to provide consistent service?
I think with security consulting, a lot of times the customer doesn't know what they want up front, especially earlier stage companies. They might come to you thinking they need compliance, but they're not ready for compliance yet. Or they might think, I want you to do a review on this one thing, but in reality, there's other things that are more important. So when you work with these early stage companies and they don't necessarily have a security leader giving them feedback on what they should focus on, a lot of times they know they have a problem. They knew they need to work on the security space, but they just need help defining where to start. So even before you come on board and kind of define the scope of what you're going to do, those initial discussions can lead you in any number of ways. So I think going into those, it's important to realize they're asking for door number one, but it could be door number 2 or number 3. You just have to talk through that and figure that out quickly in those initial discussions.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and what would you say the biggest challenge is when you start working or even onboarding a new vendor that provide like another service?
Yeah, so when I was on the other side of the table and bringing in new vendors, I think the challenge for me was just onboarding them in an efficient way. Obviously, I'm bringing them in because they're subject matter experts, but they need to be able to apply that effectively to my environment. So it's how can I get them the information they need to where I can get what I need from them, and it's going to apply in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. So, and if you could try to sum up, like, what are the key differences between your current role as, a vCISO or the leader of the vCISO department, as opposed to a full-time CISO?
So I think the biggest difference is not having the breadth of relationships across the leadership team at the company. When you're a CISO at a company, you already know all the players involved. You know a lot about them personally. You know their backgrounds. You know their motivations. You know what works and what doesn't work. And in the vCISO chair, in some cases, you're coming in to kind of run the company. But in other cases, more often than not, I'm coming in to help a CTO or a CIO that owns security. And then I'm kind of giving them guidance, and then they have to go off and make things happen. So the difference is enabling a person to go and do what you think needs to be done within the company, as opposed to kind of having those relationships yourself to be able to go off and do it. You're enabling your stakeholders instead of doing it yourself.
Yeah. So far, your answer is aligned with the rest of the answers I got for this question. And yeah, I tend to agree. Not being there like on a full-time basis is definitely challenging.
Yeah. So it's as much coaching as it is, figuring out the right answer. It's coaching the person on how to make this successful.
Yeah, but in my experience, and I'm not sure if you had the similar experience, I think when a company reaches a certain level of maturity, they will try to transition from having a vCISO to a full-time CISO. I'm not sure if we, if we can tie it back to like revenue or, funding rounds or anything like that. But at some point, typically for me, I think the tilting point was when I saw that, like when the company, when a customer started consuming more than probably 2.5, 3 days a week of our services for that role, this is when they decide to go ahead and like hire an FTE.
Yeah, agreed. And at some point, it's going to be a tipping point for a CTO or CIO that's doing it part-time, or an engineering lead early on, and they're just going to need to have someone dedicated to it, because it's always going to be part-time for them.
Yeah. So if I were to talk with your customers, what do you think they would say about you and about their work experience with you?
So, I go back to something the CFO I worked with for years and years. He once told me I was the most normal security person he's ever worked with, but he meant that in a good way. He meant that I was good at explaining complex things and making them seem simple, or put it in language that executives can understand and make decisions based off of, and also being able to do that for different levels of the company. I think as a CISO, you need to be comfortable speaking to business leaders. You need to be comfortable speaking to engineers. And you have to understand where they're coming from and translate your needs into something that makes sense for them.
Yeah, and I think that's the strength of I think that what differentiates between a great CISO to maybe a good CISO or even an average CISO. The ability to talk to the business and the ability to convey messages, and be able to talk to like different tiers in the company. Like you speak differently when you talk to the DevOps as opposed to the R&D or engineering, as opposed to the C-level executives. So yeah.
I was just doing a program assessment for a new client that wanted us to build a roadmap for them, and I had a technical lead from my team there with me, just kind of shadowing me so I could give him some exposure to the process that we're doing. And I was catching up with him afterwards, and I said, what did you think of it? What's your feedback? How did it go? Because it was mostly me working with the client. He said, it just seems so easy. He goes, I thought we'd be diving into deep technical discussions, or there'd be disagreements, and it wasn't like that. He goes, it just felt like a casual conversation, and both sides were engaged, and it was just easy to listen to. He goes, I don't know if that was just, you've had so much experience with this, it makes it look easy, and I said, no, it's just, that's the goal. Sure, it takes some experience to get there, but I think he was just surprised that, oh yeah, we weren't digging into technical problems. It's more, you work on the higher level risks and problems, and then once you kind of decide what the right approach is, then the technical stuff becomes easy because you've already decided on your direction.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you a question about what would you consider, or actually who would you consider to be your ideal customer?
I think people that put trust in their teams, especially, if you're an early stage company, you hire smart people and then you let them go and do what they're there to do. And I think that applies to security too. A lot of times you come into these companies, they're building away, but then when they get to security, they can get conservative and they start to question their people. So, when companies put people in a position to succeed and allow them to push forward at the pace they want to go, that's where it gets fun for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what qualities don't you like in a customer?
I think the toughest part is when someone sees security as kind of a check the box exercise. And this definitely comes into play when when compliance is part of it, right? They see it as, okay, you've given me a list of things to do. Once I do that, I'm good. I don't have to worry about security anymore. We can go back to the way we used to be and just keep going. And so it's important for those customers to realize that, security is a process. This is where we're going to start, but it's going to be continuous improvement. And if you don't buy into that mindset, it's always going to be tough for you.
Yeah, and I've had very similar experiences, you know, during this last 12 years since I founded my company. And, you know, I think personally for me, by the way, I would say when you get attacked by your customer or customers or some individual within a specific customer for just, you know, explaining what needs to be done from a compliance standpoint, and let's just say like reviewing, you know, some key requirements in the PCI, and then needing to defend the PCI framework, that really
Yes.
that's really annoying to me. But yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it's part of it.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Exactly. Just the harbinger of bad news here. Um, so, and I know you have a LinkedIn profile, and I know you run this vCISO program over at Cadence. Did you have any preferences? Let's say our listeners want to connect with you online, want to pick your brain, want to, you know, explore about your services. What's the best way for them to do it?
Oh, I think, you know, you hit the two nails on the head. It's either LinkedIn or through the cadencegroup.com. I would recommend LinkedIn because of things like this. You know, I try to do a number of podcasts, webinars where we talk about, you know, topics that are going to be relevant to people. So kind of going beyond the static content that you're going to see on the web page, LinkedIn is probably the best way to get the most value from connecting with me and trying to learn more about our services.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. So for, you know, before we can wrap this up, two bonus questions that I like to ask. If you had unlimited funds, what would you do with your life?
This might seem off the wall, but I think I would build a time machine so then I could go back and see things from the past. Of course, that's assuming I can just throw money at the problem and actually make a time machine, but I'm making that assumption.
Wow, nice. Super interesting. I'm, you know, as a Trekkie myself and a sci-fi fan, consuming anything sci-fi related, I can totally relate to that. There's actually, if you go into the NASA webpage and you know, search for for these two words, time machine, they actually have like a scientific explanation explaining why, even if you're able to build a time machine, you wouldn't be able to travel to the past, but only to the future. So that might be interesting to you. That might be interesting for you to read. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. And look, when you have that time machine, just hit me up. I'll be more than curious to see what was here. Like you know, but not like in the realm of like hundreds of years. I'm talking like thousands and thousands of years. That would be really interesting to see.
Yeah. No, I mean, you've got young kids like me, you know, they're still into dinosaurs and all these crazy things. So it would be great to be able to go back and see what that was really about. Assuming I can survive all that.
Yeah. And assuming you don't mess up with the world, like if you don't step on a butterfly and, you know, then when you come back, there's nothing here, but
yes, I'll be careful.
Okay. Did you have did you read or listen to or maybe watched anything specifically lately that has inspired you that you wanted to share?
Oh, you know, I think there's a book that I read very recently that I think was referred by a consultant friend that I think if you're in the consulting world or you want to be, it's super good. I'm going to grab it. It's right here. And this is total shameless plug. I have no connection to this, but this is probably my favorite book on being a consultant that I've ever read. It's called The Business of Expertise by David Baker. I was thinking about it earlier because we were talking about that idea of being a true subject matter expert and not being watered down in what you do for clients. That's really what this book is about helping you focus on what your expertise is or should be and aligning that to what your customers' needs are. And if you can do that, you can be as successful as you want to be. But it's kind of like the cream of books on being a consultant.
Okay. So noted, and it will be part of the transcript. Thank you for that. Okay, I guess, I mean, we could probably talk more for at least an hour, but you know, for timing purposes, and I want to be respectful of your time. That's we can wrap this up. I wanted to thank you for taking the time and joining me on my podcast, and hoping your insights would resonate with our listeners. And thank you for being here, and hopefully we could do it again someday.
Yes, it's been a pleasure, Ben. Thanks for inviting me, and I can't wait to hear the recording.
Will do. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your week.
All right, take care.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of CISO Insiders. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more professional content, please check us out on social media.